What's up guys, it's Wally, and today we're going to be talking about which is the best Paldean Starter to use for VGC. So now that we know the final typings, abilities, stats, and movesets for each of these Pokemon, I think we have a clearer picture of how each of these Pokemon can fit into certain teams, and what kind of roles they can fulfill. So I thought it'd be nice to kind of look at each of these Pokemon, kind of go over a few of those things, look at their strengths and weaknesses, and kind of rank them from worst to best in terms of competitive play. Quick disclaimer though, these are my opinions, and also since we don't really have a meta in place because the ladder doesn't start until December, we really don't necessarily know which Pokemon is going to be best for the ladder. So again, we really won't know until December comes around. So this really is just my list based on the abilities, the stats, and everything like that. So we'll get into the list, but before we do, as always, if you guys are new here, just haven't yet, please make sure to go down and hit the subscribe button. If you guys do enjoy the video, please make sure to drop a like too. But let's get into this list. And we'll start with the worst, and I'm so sorry to all you Quaxley fans out there, because I know I have a few in my chat, but coming in last on this list is Quaquaval. Now, I do think it is a pretty cool typing. I think water fighting is pretty nice. Especially since Meowscarada is a grass and dark type, so the fighting really does kind of counter the dark, whereas, the grass of Meowscarada would kind of counter the water of Quaquaval. So I think it's really even from that perspective, and I really like that Pokemon did that this generation as well. But the main reason why it comes in last for me is because of its stats. Now, don't get me wrong, the 120 attack stat is really awesome. That is pretty high. That's pretty incredible. However, all of the rest of the stats are pretty average. But its HP, defense, and special defense stats at 85, 80, and 75, I mean, that's pretty weak. That means that it might potentially get one shot, or very possibly get 2 or 3 shot, I mean, that's probably the most likely case scenario there. But with the 120 attack stat, that still makes it pretty darn good. So, again, not completely knocking it from that perspective, but also, with the 85 speed stat, that's not too bad. That'll outspeed a lot of Pokemon. However, that really is in that mid-range right there. So, it's not going to outspeed a lot of Pokemon, or it's not going to outspeed every Pokemon, I should say. But also, if you want to use it for a Trick Room team at some point, it's not really going to be great for that either, because it's not quite slow enough to be a Trick Room Pokemon. Of course, its ability does kind of save it. Kind of like every other starter in Pokemon history, it does have the ability, and when I say starter, I mean like water starter, it does have Torrent. So that's its normal ability. It's the one you'll most likely see. So it basically just powers up water attacks when it has really low HP. However, its hidden ability is the one that I'm sure most people are going to be looking for, and that's Moxie. So what Moxie does is essentially anytime you knock out a Pokemon, your attack stat gets raised by 1 stage. So if you haven't used Moxie before, but you did for some reason use Ice Rider Calyrex in Sword and Shield, it is essentially the same thing as Chilling Neigh. So it will raise your attack stat for every Pokemon that you knock out. That's a really nice thing, especially for a Pokemon like this that has that attack stat at 120. That's going to make you hit extra hard. So basically, if you do raise 1 stage, then you will essentially raise your attack stat by 50%. So that 120 would go up to 180, which, again, is pretty incredible. The other great thing about these Pokemon too, and we'll kind of get into this as we get into Meowscarada and Skeledirge. I think I'm pronouncing that right. If I'm not, someone please correct me on that. But each of them has a specific move that each of them can use in this generation. Kind of like last generation, at least for Cinderace, I remember it had Pyro Ball. Can't remember the other 2 moves on the other 2 Pokemon, but obviously Pyro Ball was its exclusive move. Well, Quaquaval, I hope I'm saying that right. I'm going to keep mixing up these pronunciations, so don't be surprised if you hear multiple pronunciations here. But this one has the specific move Aqua Step. So what it does is basically do 80 damage. It is a physical move, but you are guaranteed to raise your speed stat by 1 stage. So like I said before, how it is kind of mid-range, with a speed stat of 85. If you do end up using that move, you will essentially, again, raise your speed by 50%. That's really nice because that'll put you up around like Meowscarada speed. Maybe a little faster than Meowscarada, but at the same time, put it up in that higher range. So if you do want to go that route and you think that you have enough bulk that you'll be able to at least survive 1 move, and you use Aqua Step, you might be able to take priority over your opponent on that next turn then. But aside from Aqua Step though, its move pool isn't incredibly diverse. I mean, it's nice because, as you can tell, the fact that it is a duck, it does have a couple of flying moves, obviously in acrobatics, air slash. Obviously, it is more of a physical attacker than a special attacker, so really you would want to go acrobatics as opposed to air slash, but still, you get a couple of flying moves, you get a couple, obviously you have the fighting moves, the water moves as your stab, you get fling for as a dark move, but other than that, I mean, you get U-turn as well, but other than that, you really don't get a diverse move pool here. There aren't a ton of other moves that you can really put on it, so if you do end up getting a Terra type for Quaquaval, then, Quaquaval, then you really don't have a ton of options for other stab moves that you would have on it, aside from, I guess, Terra Blast. So that's not great from that perspective if you did end up wanting to make it into a Terra type. But still, like I said, Aqua Step is a great move. It does have a great base attack stat, and it also has Moxie as its ability. Those are three incredible things right there. However, when you weigh it against the fact that all the rest of its stats are pretty average, it doesn't have a very diverse move pool, and a few other things. I feel like Quaquaval is probably the worst selection out of the three. However, again, with the good things that I did point out about it, doesn't mean that it's a bad Pokemon to use. I think it does have some good utility here. And again, because it is a little squishy, you might, if you want to max out the attack and max out the speed, you could end up putting a Focus Sash on it. That way you could end up doing Aqua Step, raise your attack so you will outspeed a lot of other Pokemon on that next turn. So that way you will get 2 max attack moves. Well, I mean, obviously, if you do end up doing doubles and you do end up getting knocked out by 2 Pokemon on that first turn, I mean, that's all for naught. But if you are doing singles, that's perfect right there. But that's one strategy you can go with, but, that's one of the only things I can think about right now. So, I do think that Quaquaval is going to be pretty decent. However, out of the 3 that we have here, I think it's going to be the least successful out of them. Now, this is where the list really got hard for me, because I kept going back and forth between Meowscarada and Skeledirge. But I think I kind of settled on the fact that second on this list is going to be Meowscarada. And this kind of does break my heart a little bit because it is the starter that I ended up going with. But unfortunately for me, I thought that the amount of weaknesses it had really were the thing that kind of put it over the edge for me and why it ended up having to be second. Because unfortunately for Meowscarada, it does have 7 weaknesses. Between Fire, Ice, Fighting, Poison, Flying, and Fairy as a 2x weakness, and Bug as a 4x. Obviously, there aren't a ton of huge, Bug-type Pokemon here. However, having that 4x weakness is still pretty bad, especially for a Pokemon that doesn't have a great HP or defense or special defense stat. And this is something I should have talked about with Quaquaval, because Quaquaval actually has only 5 weaknesses and I think 6 or 7 resistances. So that was one of the good things about it as well. Sorry I didn't mention that, but now you guys know about that. However, for Meowscarada, it does have those 7 weaknesses. It's nice because it does have 6 resistances, and it does have that 1 immunity to Psychic. However, having 7 weaknesses, including 1 that is a 4x weakness, I think that's what kind of, again, what I said, put it over the top as number 2 on this list. However, the good things about this Pokemon are really its attack and speed stat. Like what I said with Quaquaval, with it having a high attack stat, but having a mediocre speed stat kind of being, not a great thing about it. Well, at least Meowscarada does have an incredible speed stat. Like I said, too, its HP, defense, and special defense aren't really incredible or anything like that, so you do have a good shot of getting one shot, especially with so many weaknesses. However, having the speed at 123 means it's going to outspeed a lot of things, especially early on when you're not going to have a lot of legendaries. So, you're not going to be seeing a ton of really, really, really speedy Pokemon that are extremely strong too. So you are going to outspeed a lot of things, and with the 110 base attack stat, that's pretty incredible too. The special attack at 81 means, you can have a little bit of crossover for if you wanted to be a mixed attacker, but really, honestly, going with the attack is really the smartest way to go with this. So one of the really incredible things to me about this is its ability Protean. Now, this is an ability that I think was introduced with Kecleon. but then was also given to Greninja, which is my second favorite Pokemon, which makes me love it even more. But then now was given to Meowscarada as well. So the thing about Protean is the fact that basically whatever move that you end up using, Meowscarada will change its typing to it. So Protean did end up getting nerfed this generation a little bit. So while in other generations, you would be able to basically change your type anytime you choose a move. In this case now, in Gen 9, it only occurs once you switch in. So basically, if you switch in, you can only change your typing once. However, if you switch out and switch back in again, you can change it once again. So that's really the nerf right there, so you can't just keep changing it the whole time that you're out there. So that's kind of a bad thing about it, but at the same time, it's still nice that you'll be able to change your typing. I mean, that's a way of like Terra typing, or terraforming, or whatever you want to call it, without actually having to waste your Terra type on Meowscarada. So if you have that ability, you basically have a built-in Terra type. So that's really awesome. And the great thing about that too is you can choose for it to be whatever you want it to be based on what's in the move pool. But that's another great thing about this Pokemon, is its move pool. So I will say, kind of like what we were talking about with Quaquaval, with its exclusive move, the exclusive move for Meowscarada is called Flower Trick. The awesome thing about Flower Trick, and this is something that I really disliked about Urshifu, was the fact that this always results in a critical hit, and it does not check accuracy. Obviously, the accuracy thing didn't come with Urshifu, that comes with Meowscarada, but always resulting in a critical hit is an incredible thing. I mean, you basically ignore like any defense boosts, or anything like that, and you basically do double the damage. So, I mean, what's not to love about that if you're going to be using it? Plus, you're never going to miss. I mean, of course, if someone does protect or something like that, of course you're going to miss. But at the same time, like, if they don't protect or anything, at least you don't have to worry about missing. And unfortunately, as you've seen in some of our videos, we have a big problem with that. So having something like that on Meowscarada is going to be something that's going to be big for me. So I think that's a move that you're going to see a lot come December 1st. So be prepared for that, but that's something you're going to see me use for sure too. But as you can see in the rest of the move pool too, I mean, my goodness, man, you have acrobatics on it as well. Of course, you do have fighting. Of course, you have a lot of grass and dark types as your stab moves, which is great. You have a fairy move, you have bug, you have rock, you have ghost. You have psychic moves too if you wanted to even go into like rest or even skill swap. I mean, that's incredible right there too. It's the fact that it has skill swap. I mean, think about like down the line once, you know, legendaries are introduced into the formats. I mean, do a skill swap of Protean onto like one of your legendaries. That's going to be absolutely incredible. Be prepared for that. But my whole point of this, and like even with Thunder Punch, you have Poison. Like there are a lot of moves that you can put onto Meowscarada. So you could really benefit with that Protean. So again, like I said, you can kind of use it as your own Terra type right there. And if you want to switch out and put it back in, you can change it to something else too. But either way, there are a lot of options with Meowscarada. Again, I will say the downside is the fact that it is extremely squishy with its low HP, defense, and special defense. You might have a couple moves out there, but don't expect to be out there for too long. So definitely for items, I definitely see Focus Sash being on there for sure. But one that I think that would be pretty interesting, based on the speed of some of the other Pokemon that you'll see in the meta, is if for some reason you just don't outspeed a lot of the more meta Pokemon, you could end up putting Choice Scarf on it. That way you can almost guarantee to outspeed them, unless they have Choice Scarf or Tailwind or something like that as well. Or if you know that you're going to outspeed them, you can always end up putting like a choice band on it. That way your attacks are going to hit so much harder. I mean, you will have that downside of being choice locked into one move. However, if you do have that benefit of upping your attack to, you know, kind of go along with it, I think it's definitely worth it, at least in my opinion. So those are two kind of items that I could see on Meowscarada, and two great, I guess, strategies to kind of go along with it. So Meowscarada, I think, again, is going to be a great Pokemon. However, the amount of weaknesses it gets, especially the 4X weakness, I think kind of keep it out of the one spot for me. So that's why it really does kind of come in second here. Next up is the Pokemon that I think is going to be the best Paldean starter come December 1st, and that is Skeledirge. So those of you guys who end up picking Quaquaval as your starter, congratulations, you made a great choice. So the main reason why I think Skeledirge ends up edging out Meowscarada here for the number 1 spot is because of its bulk. I mean, its HP is at 104 and its defense is at 100. I mean, that's pretty darn good. That's going to be out on the field for quite some time. That's going to be really tough to one-shot with a physical move. I mean, its special defense is at 75, and yeah, that could definitely be much better. But I think its HP at 104, kind of makes up for that quite some bit. Its special attack is at 110, and that's pretty impressive too. And we just got done talking about how Meowscarada has a 110 attack and how that's impressive. I mean, its special attack being at 110 is just as impressive too. It's just on the special side. The one downside here is that its speed is at 66. Now, that's kind of down in the mid to low tier range for speed. So that's really not going to outspeed a lot of things. However, that does mean that it could be a pretty good candidate for a Trick Room team. I mean, again, 66 isn't incredibly slow. There are Pokemon around 30 and 40. So it won't outspeed them in Trick Room. However, there are a lot of teams that really rely on speed. So Skeledirge will probably outspeed a lot of the Pokemon on that team. So it being on a Trick Room team, I think, is pretty feasible. Its speed is kind of high enough that if you do put it on a Tailwind team, it might outspeed some Pokemon too. So I think Skeledirge can work on both teams. And I think its utility there, I think, kind of edges out Meowscarada as well. Also, if we look at its ability here, we do have Blaze, which is the same ability that every fire starter has had all the way back to Gen 1. But its hidden ability is Unaware. So what this means is that when it's dealing or taking damage from another Pokemon, it ignores the stat stages. So essentially, if the Pokemon across the way does raise its own attack or special attack by 1 or 2 stages, you're not going to be taking damage based on that. You're going to be taking damage based on if it didn't get those raises at all. And on the flip side too, if that Pokemon ends up raising its special defense by 1 or 2 stages, you're going to be dealing damage based on if it didn't get those raises at all. So I think that's a pretty incredible ability. And when I was kind of comparing that to Meowscarada's Protean, I feel like they're kind of on the same level. I mean, it's really kind of hard to kind of compare them because they're both really incredible abilities. For me, even though Protean did kind of get that nerf, I think Protean's a little better of an ability, at least in my opinion. But I think Unaware is really incredible too. So they're kind of interchangeable. You can make a case for, either one being the better one. But I think Meowscarada kind of edges it out there. But, you'll kind of see. I feel like Skeledirge ends up kind of edging it out in other categories as well, which is why it takes the number 1 spot. But I feel like Unaware and Protean are kind of on the same level there. I just want to point that out because, again, Unaware is an incredible ability, and if I ended up going with Quaquaval, I would definitely not be upset with this ability. I would definitely be using Unaware anytime I could throw Skeledirge out there. So I think it's a great ability, and definitely part of the reason why it's there in the number 1 spot. But if we also move on to the moves here, its exclusive move is called Torch Song. So this move is actually pretty awesome when I looked at it. So it's a special move, obviously, which is perfect for Skeledirge. It has a power of 80, but the main appeal to this for me is the fact that it has a 100% chance to raise your special attack by 1 stage. And we talked about how Skeledirge has a lot of bulk, and it usually will be out there on the field for quite some time. That means if you use Torch Song a couple times, man, you're going to be powerful. I really feel like Skeledirge, if you're able to get a couple Torch Songs off, that thing actually has the possibility of sweeping other teams. Obviously, it has a couple weaknesses, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But still, being able to be out on the field for quite some time, being able to raise your special attack quite a bit too, Skeledirge is going to be really, really dangerous. And then if we look at the rest of the move pool as well, I mean, it's pretty diverse too. I mean, if you look at some of the typings here, you got Dark, obviously Ghost and Fire because those are, the stab moves, of course. You have Ground, Normal, Dragon even, Psychic, Grass. There's a Fairy move even. There's a lot of different typings here in its move pool. So if you do have a Skeledirge and you want to terrestrialize it into, a couple different typings, you already have a couple different stab moves that are already in your move pool. So I think that's a really big benefit there because, don't get me wrong, Terra Blast is a great move too, and I think it's going to be really impactful for Pokemon that terrestrialize. However, I think being able to have a move that is already a stab move with the type that you're terrestrializing into, again, I think that's a huge benefit. So Skeledirge is a really great candidate to be able to terrestrialize, especially with its diverse move pool. So I think that's one really great thing about it. Meowscarada has a great move pool as well, don't get me wrong. But again, Skeledirge, I think with its bulk, is a better option to terrestrialize because it has that option to be able to stay out on the field for longer. And again, with Torch Song, being able to raise your special attack, huge benefit for me. So really, when I'm looking at it, I feel like Skeledirge really has the edge in like 2 out of the 3 categories. Some might argue that, again, Unaware might be better than Protean, but again, I'm going to give Meowscarada the edge on that one. So it really has the 2 out of the 3 for the benefit there. Again, what we're going to talk about with Skeledirge with its weaknesses, again, I think it kind of edges out Meowscarada in that as well, because Skeledirge really only has 5 weaknesses. They do end up coming from typings that are pretty common. So you have like water, ground, rock, and what is it, ghost and dark as well. So those are your weaknesses. However, you have 7 resistances. And not just that, but you have 2 immunities as well. Obviously normal and fighting because you are a ghost type. But being able to have 7 resistances, man, you have a pretty good chance of going against a Pokemon that's not going to have a great move against you. And if they do, it's not a stab move. So it's not going to do as much damage as, they would be hoping. But even so, like, Skeledirge, I think, is going to be out on the field for quite some time, especially with all those resistances. So I think that's a really big benefit of Skeledirge and something that it has over Meowscarada as well. So now that there are 4 categories, not 3, Skeledirge really has the edge in 3 out of the 4 categories. So I think Skeledirge really takes the #1 spot here. So that's our list. And like I said, this really is based on my opinion. And since we really don't have a meta yet, and we don't know which Pokemon are going to be really popular on the ladder, really this is all kind of just conjecture. And just based on what I like from, the abilities and the stats and the moves and everything like that. So again, I might be proven wrong once we get to December 1st. I kind of hope I am, because I would love to see Meowscarada being the best starter here. However, again, I think Skeledirge really is going to be the best. And again, just because Quaquaval ended up being the worst one on this list doesn't mean that I don't think it's going to be a great Pokemon to use for competitive. I think it's a good Pokemon, has a lot of good utility, and could really fit well on a lot of good teams. So just because it's worst on this list doesn't mean that it's not going to be great on the ladder. But thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did, make sure to go down and drop a like, and we'll see you guys next time.